saw that he was holding a small blade, glinting with fresh redness. "Killing lizards?" I asked tentatively. He winked, grinned big and said, "Just making some final adjustments." And he walked off. As he did so, I heard a slow awful moan from behind their caravan. It was the guttural wail of an animal. But before I could reach it, there was the sound of the door slamming, and only twin peels of blood droplets were left in the sand. Many weeks passed. One day, I was home alone when there was a knock at the door. I opened it and saw John, standing and smiling. His appearance struck an instant unease in me, but he started apologizing for the night I had witnessed, and seemed very genuine. He talked about how his drinking was out of hand and he really shouldn't have gone off around me. He wanted me to know that things were finally getting better, and wanted me to come over and see them all. Half out of fear, half out of childish naivety, I followed him. "I really am sorry. He should know not to act that way," he kept saying, "but things are finally getting back to normal. It's been a long road, and a hard one, but things are finally coming full circle." I noted that now all the windows had been blacked out. He opened the door and shut it behind me. Inside it smelled worse than ever. I almost gagged at the fecal stench, the burned plastic and mincemeat, and it was hard to see too. The whole place was dim out through the taped-up windows. A cloud of foul-smelling steam hung in the air. I looked down and saw Michael, casually sprawled on a mattress playing PlayStation, as if unaware of the changes. He was excited to see me. "Hey man. Things have gotten so much better. It's been a long road, and a hard one, but it's finally getting back to the way things were." He was grinning like he could hardly contain himself. Him and his father kept exchanging sneaky smiles. I noticed he was wearing a shirt and pants many sizes too big for him. "Who's up for a beer?" he announced. His dad jokingly responded, "Yes sir, man of the house," and bent down to get some cans out. Michael shot me a look like we were both in on a big joke. I tried to ignore the noises coming from behind the bead curtain, but he sensed it on me and said, "Wait till you see it. Our brand new dog." Michael passed through the curtain in few steps. I felt John press a cold beer into my hand and his palm against my back, pushing me through the beads and into the taxidermy room. The smell was all-pervading. Bowls of meats lay around the floor, some visibly glistening with maggots. The buzzing of flies half melted into the window filled the place. And in the corner of the room, overlooked by the stuffed heads of the animals, was a kennel. The rest was like a fever dream. Michael's voice was sonorous and far away as he said, "Out, dog, out." John stood in the corner, pride swelling in his face. And then it was shuffling out of its kennel, one paw after the next. The brand new dog. It was John's best work by far. The unsteady, wobbling walk was achieved through 2 cuts to the wrists and ankles, very small in the sand. His hands and feet dragged pathetically behind him as he lurched forward. A diagram of wires covered the body, performing functions I could only guess at. The back was bent into the curved shape of a dog, and the head jutted forward from the neck enmeshed in chicken wire and wounds. But the face was the masterpiece. The jaws had been stretched out in a contraption looking like a mouthguard, that sturdied itself with thick pylons in the gums, split down the middle so the entire tongue was permanently flapping out, dripping. The nose had been, it seemed, flattened into shape, and the open nasal cavities were thickly coated with wetness. The ears, dragged back towards the shoulders with chicken wire, were now long and pointed, stretching the whole head into a brand new shape. The only thing that remained untouched were Dog's terrified eyes, from which I saw were bleeding streams of tears. "Good boy," Michael was saying, kneeling to Dog's level, "that's a good dog." Then he struck it on the back so that it buckled over. "Stop that," he ordered. "Dogs don't cry." Well-trained, Dog let out a series of woeful howls. Michael, pleased, pushed a bowl towards him, and Dog, eyes unblinking, eagerly dipped his face straight into it and lapped it up. Michael and John stood side by side, the father with his hand on his son's shoulder. "You did great, son," John said, "everything's almost all right again. Everything will be back to normal now." Michael nodded. "Now son, It's time to put down the dog." John gingerly helped his son grip the rifle steady, helping his fingers around the grip and the trigger. I couldn't move. Not even a foot away from me. Dog was lapping up slop, his extended snout dripping with rotten meat. I could feel the heat of his body. I was so close. Michael steadied himself with the big gun, obviously not used to its weight. He stumbled back once. His father gently helped him back up. I couldn't feel my own body anymore. Only the smell, the heat, the dog. That's it, John was saying, helping his son to aim. "Dog," Michael clicked, "come here, boy." With horrible slowness, Dog turned on his spindle legs toward his brother. As Michael crooned, good boy," the most awful sound emanated from somewhere inside the dog's throat, the gurgled sound of attempts at human speech in between half-formed barks and whimpers. As the blast exploded through the air, I passed out. When I came to, the gunpowder smell was still heavy in the air. I groggily took in the scene, a lumpen mess on the floor that had once been Dog, John, beaming at it, and Michael looking for once strangely serious, as if something had occurred to him just too late. As I slowly began twitching my fingers, urging any sort of movement out of my deadened body, John placed a hand on his son's shoulder and said, "It's finally over, son. It's back to the way things were." For a moment, Michael looked at him, confused. Then he suddenly struck his hand hard with the butt of the gun against the wall. There was an audible crunch. My leg twitched. John looked genuinely hurt and went to grab the gun off his boy, but he yanked it out of reach. "Son, what are you?" "Stop that," Michael screamed, "don't do that." I began to inch across the floor, pushing my dead-weight body with weak leg thrusts. John lurched forward forcefully, "Give it to me, you little cunt." There was a second blast and John fell to the ground, screaming and hollering. Thick black smoke and a new, richer texture to the flesh smell wafted out. His whole foot was gone. Wasting no time, Michael leapt upon him on all fours, brandishing the little blade from earlier. John was crying and yelling as I pushed myself out of the doorway. Working fast, Michael carved through the Achilles tendon in his left ankle, which loosened with a slight pop. John screamed again. I pushed through the jangly bead curtain. There was the sound of wrestling in the room, and more screaming. "Son, for fuck's sake, stop this." As I hobbled, half paralyzed, onto my knees and opened the door, I heard for the last time, "Stop that. Dogs, don't talk." The caravan was gone within days. My father didn't know what to believe when I tried telling him the story. I was delirious from shock and had to be taken to hospital. When my mother found out about the nights spent at hospital, she flew in to take me back. I spent the next 7 years systematically forgetting certain things about my time with my father. I managed to pick up at school after a long time spent as a suspected mute or something. Even made friends, eventually. I received little correspondence from my father. He remains at the same caravan park to this day. One day I got a call from him saying a young man had been by, asking for me. He was sad to hear I no longer lived there. He asked to leave a message, which goes as follows. "Dear Nan, it's been 15 dog years since we last met, but just wanted to let you know the old bitch is still kicking. I've made some big improvements since you last saw her. Hope everything's alright with you too." I never heard of him again. Hey guys, Keck here. Please take a minute to take a look at my Patreon, where you can find some starving African children. Now then, please enjoy the video. I've got something fresh. You guys should appreciate this. Years ago, when I was 16, in high school, lived in not quite a city, more like an old town that expanded more than it could really support. Decent amount of rundown and abandoned buildings. Get into a kind of urban exploration kick, sneaking into places and checking them out. Occasionally engage in minor looting, sometimes you find neat stuff. Manage to talk a few friends into coming with me sometimes, but only 3 are relevant for this story. One was an old buddy of mine who I'll be calling Bill, and another was a girl I had a minor crush on who I'll call Susan. The last one is the most important. He told us his name was Eli, and there's probably not much point in censoring anything for him. Bill, Susan and I all went to the same school, but I met Eli while I was checking out some old restaurant. Spooked the hell out of me because I had just snuck in through a window and he speaks up from right fucking as hell. We get to talking, I tell him about my hobby and ask if he's doing something similar. Yeah, more or less. I like to keep an eye out for unusual things. Or things that don't belong. Okay. Seems kinda weird, but he's friendly, and I'm running around scavenging junk in a half-wrecked diner or whatever so I can talk. We chat for a bit. Turns out Eli doesn't go to my school, which explains why I've never seen him around before. He listens more than he talks, and doesn't volunteer much info about himself, but I don't want to pry too much and he seems alright. We clamber back out. I startle a cat that was sitting by the window. Eli pets it before it runs off. Part on good terms. A week or so later, I'm hanging out with Bill, showing him this old 3-story apartment building or motel or something. Planning the expedition like we're getting away with the heist of the century. Suddenly still exploring? Jesus fuck Eli from behind me again. Bill actually jumps and I laugh at him like I hadn't nearly soiled myself. Introduce the two, they seem to hit it off well enough. Ask Eli if he wants to come with us to explore the place Friday night. He just kinda looks at me for a second, then tilts his head and stares at the building. Good 10 seconds of silence. Yeah. Might be a good idea. Neat. Friday night rolls around. I manage to talk Susan into coming with us, so it's me, Bill and her. And Eli, when he finally shows up. I'm watching this time, you bastard. Not again. He casually strolls down the street in plain view with his hands in his pockets. He's grinning at me, he knows I was expecting another jump scare. Whatever, I introduce him to Susan, we're all friends now, let's rock. So it's about 7 p.m., still got some light out, we're standing outside the place. Building is kind of dilapidated and boarded up but shouldn't be too dangerous to wander around in and we've all got flashlights. Also apparently a nesting ground for stray cats because I can see 3 of them sitting in what was probably an old flower bed or something and another just darted under the front steps. The front's still locked up, but there's a side door that doesn't properly close anymore. It looks like it used to be boarded up, but that had rotted off. I may have helped it along. So we enter the building. This was a bad idea. The place is mostly normal. Old, dirty, has that slight moldy decrepit wreck smell all abandoned places tend to have. We wander around the ground floor a bit, nothing really interesting, it's mostly just a lobby. Figure we might find something more interesting on the 2nd or 3rd floors, that's where the rooms are. The 3 of us are joking around, but Eli's pretty quiet. Whenever we go into a room he'd just kinda stare into it from the doorway then pace around the walls. Whatever works for him, I guess. The rooms are all empty though, guess they cleared the place out pretty good when they left it. Only thing we saw was a few more cats darting down the halls. We look around for maybe 30 minutes before deciding to call it quits. Not a bad time, but I'm a little disappointed we didn't find someone's old luggage full of plus-size ballerina outfits or something. So we head down the stairs. And keep going down the stairs. Conversation peters off. Why are there so many steps here? Did we get turned around and go